The blood wouldn't stop. Elena Hartwell pressed her palms harder against the stranger's chest, watching the crimson seep between her fingers like water through a broken dam. His body was a map of violence, 4 deep gashes carved across his torso, each one wide enough to slide her hand into. The kind of wounds that should have killed him already. But his chest still rose. Barely. She'd found him 3 minutes ago, slumped against an oak tree at the edge of Blackwood Forest, 20 feet off the path she took every morning to buy her mother's medication before her shift at Thornwood Estate. She'd heard the groaning first, low, animal, full of a pain that made her stomach clench. Every instinct had screamed at her to keep walking. To mind her own business. To not be late again. But Elena had never been good at listening to her survival instincts. Now she was kneeling in the dirt, her gray maid's uniform soaking up blood and morning dew, trying to keep a stranger alive with nothing but her bare hands and sheer stubbornness. "Stay with me," she muttered, though she doubted he could hear her. "Don't you dare die on me." His eyes flickered open, just for a moment. They were gold. Not brown, not amber. Gold, like molten metal, like something not quite human. The color hit her like a physical force, stealing her breath, making her hands falter. Then his eyes rolled back, and he was gone again. Elena shook off the strange paralysis. She didn't have time for whatever that was. She needed bandages, pressure, a hospital. In that order. She tore strips from her uniform's hem with her teeth, wadding the fabric against the worst of the gashes. The blood soaked through immediately. She unwound the thin scarf from her neck, the one her mother had knitted 3 winters ago, and pressed it over the makeshift bandage. "You're going to owe me a new scarf," she told his unconscious face. "And an explanation for whatever did this to you." Claw marks. That's what they were. She could see it now, 4 parallel lines, deep and savage, like something with massive claws had tried to gut him. A bear, maybe. Did bears even live in Blackwood Forest? Questions for later. Right now, she needed to move him. The stranger was easily 6'4", with the kind of muscle mass that came from either obsessive gym habits or genetics that should be illegal. Moving him should have been impossible. But Elena had spent 3 years scrubbing floors, hauling laundry, and carrying trays up 4 flights of stairs at Thornwood Estate. Her arms might be thin, but they were made of wire and spite. She hooked her hands under his armpits and dragged. Inch by inch, foot by foot, she pulled him toward the road. His blood left a trail in the dirt. His head lolled against her shoulder, and the heat coming off his body was wrong, too hot, almost feverish. She could feel it through his ruined shirt, radiating like a furnace. The road appeared through the trees. Elena's arms screamed. Her lungs burned. She kept going. A delivery truck rounded the bend just as she hauled him onto the gravel shoulder. She stepped into the road, waving her bloody hands like flags of surrender. The driver, a heavy-set man with kind eyes and a Silverpine General Hospital logo on his cap, took one look at the body behind her and went pale. "Jesus Christ. He needs a hospital," Elena said. "Now." 45 minutes later, she watched the nurses wheel the stranger through the emergency room doors. She'd ridden in the back of the truck with him, keeping pressure on his wounds, talking to him even though he couldn't hear her. His breathing had grown stronger during the drive, impossibly stronger, as if his body was knitting itself back together through sheer force of will. When the doctors took over, Elena slipped away. She'd given a fake name. She didn't want questions. She didn't want to explain how a maid from the poor district had ended up covered in a stranger's blood at 6 in the morning. She looked at her hands. Still trembling. Still stained red. Her shift at Thornwood had started 2 hours ago. Mrs. Blackwell was waiting at the servants' entrance like a spider who'd felt a fly touch its web. "Well, well." The head housekeeper's voice dripped with satisfaction as Elena approached. She was a tall woman, severe, with steel-gray hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face into a permanent expression of disapproval. "Look what the cat dragged in." Elena's heart sank. She knew that tone. That smile. This wasn't going to be a reprimand. This was going to be an execution. Mrs. Blackwell, I can explain. Save your breath. The older woman's eyes traveled over Elena's ruined uniform, the blood stains, the torn hem. Her lip curled. Lady Thornwood wishes to speak with you. Immediately. The walk to Lady Thornwood's sitting room felt like a march to the gallows. Elena's shoes squelched with every step, still wet from kneeling in the damp forest floor. She left faint muddy footprints on the pristine marble she'd scrubbed just yesterday. Lady Thornwood sat in a velvet armchair, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her face arranged in an expression of aristocratic disgust. She didn't invite Elena to sit. She didn't even look at her directly. I've received 12 complaints about you in the past month, Lady Thornwood said, addressing the air somewhere above Elena's left shoulder. Tardiness. Carelessness. An attitude problem. Those complaints were. I don't care what they were. Lady Thornwood's voice cracked like a whip. You're late again. 2 hours late. Looking like you've been rolling in filth. Elena swallowed her pride. Ma'am, I found a man in the forest. He was injured, dying. I couldn't leave him. Another one of your excuses, girl. Mrs. Blackwell stepped forward, triumph gleaming in her eyes. You've been nothing but trouble since the day you walked through our doors. I've worked harder than anyone on this staff, Elena said, and she hated the desperate edge creeping into her voice. 3 years without a single sick day. I've covered other people's shifts. I've done jobs no one else would do. And yet here you are. Lady Thornwood finally looked at her. Her eyes were cold, dismissive, the way one might look at a stain on an otherwise perfect tablecloth. Terminated. Effective immediately. No references. No final pay. The words hit Elena like physical blows. No references meant no chance of decent employment anywhere in the city. No final pay meant her mother's medication, the rent, the utilities, all of it, gone. Please. The words scraped out of her throat. My mother is sick. She needs. That's not my concern. Lady Thornwood waved her hand. Mrs. Blackwell, have security escort her out. The apartment was cold when Elena returned. She'd sold the space heater last month to cover a gap in the medication payments. Now the November wind crept through the cracks in the window frames, carrying with it the smell of exhaust and decay that defined the Hollows, the poorest district in Silver Pine City. Her mother was in bed, just as Elena had left her that morning. The coughing had gotten worse over the past few weeks, a wet, rattling sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her chest. Elena? Margaret Hartwell's voice was thin, fragile. You're home early. Elena forced a smile. Slow day at work. She moved to her mother's nightstand, picking up the medication bottle. Empty. She'd known it would be. The refill cost $400, $400 she no longer had. She counted the coins in her purse. $37.12. 3 years. 3 years of scrubbing floors, enduring Mrs. Blackwell's cruelty, smiling through Lady Thornwood's casual contempt. 3 years of sending every spare penny to this apartment, to these medications, to keeping her mother alive. All of it, gone in a single morning. Because she'd stopped to help a stranger. That night, Elena sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Her mother's breathing had grown worse as the day wore on. Without the medication, the infection in her lungs would spread. The doctors had been clear about that. She had maybe a week before things became critical. Elena had spent the afternoon making calls. Every employment agency in the city. Every restaurant, hotel, and cleaning service. Without references from Thornwood, no one would touch her. She was poison. Marked. Unemployable. Tears slid down her cheeks. She let them fall. There was no one here to see her weakness, no one to disappoint except herself. You should have kept walking, a voice whispered in her head. You should have let him die. But she couldn't have. That was the problem. She'd never been able to walk away from someone in pain, even when helping them cost her everything. The sound of a car engine cut through her thoughts. Elena looked down at the street. A black Mercedes had pulled up to the curb, sleek, expensive, completely out of place in the hollows. The vehicle gleamed under the flickering streetlight like a predator waiting in the shadows. 3 men stepped out. They wore suits that probably cost more than her annual salary. Their movements were coordinated, purposeful, predatory. The tallest one, dark-haired, silver streaks at his temples, looked up at her building. No. Not at her building. At her window. Their eyes met through the rain-streaked glass. Elena's blood turned to ice. Something ancient and instinctive screamed at her to run, to hide, to make herself small. But she couldn't move. Couldn't look away. The man smiled. And Elena knew, with absolute certainty, that saving that stranger in the forest had been the worst mistake of her life. If you are enjoying this video, do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 2. The knock came at exactly 9:47 p.m. Not a polite tap. Not a hesitant request for entry. This was a knock that expected the door to open, that had never been refused in its existence. Elena's hands were still trembling from watching the men exit the Mercedes. She'd spent the last 10 minutes pressed against the wall beside the window, peering through the gap in the curtains like a hunted animal. They'd entered the building. She'd heard their footsteps on the stairs, measured, unhurried, confident. Now they were here. Another knock. Harder. Miss Hartwell. The voice was deep, cultured, patient in a way that suggested its owner had never needed to rush for anything. We know you're home. We'd prefer to have this conversation inside, but we're prepared to have it in the hallway if necessary. Elena looked at her mother's bedroom door. Margaret was sleeping, finally sleeping after hours of coughing. If these men made a scene, if they woke her, if her mother saw. She opened the door. The 3 men filled the narrow hallway like shadows given form. They were tall, all of them over 6 feet, with the kind of lean, powerful builds that spoke of violence held barely in check. Their suits were immaculate, expensive, completely wrong for this building with its water-stained walls and flickering lights. The leader stepped forward. He was older than the other 2, perhaps mid-40s, with dark hair shot through with silver at the temples. His face was hard, angular, handsome in a brutal sort of way. But it was his eyes that made Elena's breath catch. They were amber. Not quite gold, but close. Wolf eyes in a human face. Miss Elena Hartwell? His voice was the same one that had spoken through the door, smooth, controlled, dangerous. Who's asking? A flicker of something crossed his features. Surprise, maybe. Or amusement. My name is Marcus Reed. I'm the beta of the Silverpine Pack. The words hit Elena like ice water. She'd heard whispers about the Silverpine Pack her entire life. Everyone in the city had. They were the shadow behind every major business deal, the invisible hand guiding politics and commerce. Werewolves who had carved out an empire in plain sight while humans pretended not to notice. Her father had noticed. 14 years ago, he'd written an article about rogue wolf attacks in the outer districts. 3 days later, he was dead. I have nothing to say to you. Elena moved to close the door. Marcus's hand shot out, catching it effortlessly. He didn't push, didn't force. He simply held it open with a strength that made her efforts to close it completely pointless. I understand your hesitation, he said. But I'm afraid this isn't a social call. Our Alpha King was attacked yesterday morning. Ambushed by rogues in Blackwood Forest. He was gravely injured. Elena's mind flashed to golden eyes, to blood seeping through her fingers, to wounds that should have been fatal. When we found him at Silverpine General, he was already healing. Someone had bound his wounds, kept pressure on the worst of them, gotten him to medical care. Marcus's amber eyes locked onto hers. His guards tracked the scent. Your scent, Miss Hartwell. It was all over him. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. The word was polite, but the tone made clear it wasn't a request. Our Alpha has been searching for the woman who saved his life. He wishes to thank you personally. To offer compensation for your trouble. I don't want compensation. I don't want anything from your pack. Miss Hartwell. I want to be left alone. Elena's voice cracked, but she forced the words out anyway. I helped someone who was hurt. That's all. I didn't know what he was, and I don't want to know. Go away. Marcus's expression hardened. The polished diplomacy slipped, just for a moment, revealing something colder underneath. The Alpha King doesn't make requests twice, he said quietly. You saved his life. He's a man who pays his debts. Surely you can understand that. And surely you can understand that I want nothing to do with werewolves. The words came out bitter, sharp-edged. Nothing. A long pause. Marcus studied her face with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Then his gaze drifted, casual, deliberate, to the bedroom door behind her. Your mother is ill, he said. It wasn't a question. Margaret Hartwell, age 53. Diagnosed with chronic pulmonary disease 2 years ago. Her medication costs $400 per week. Elena's blood turned to ice. You were terminated from Thornwood Estate this morning. No references, no final pay. Marcus's voice remained conversational, almost friendly. The rent on this apartment is due in 3 days. You have, he paused, as if doing mental calculations, roughly $37 to your name. How do you? We're very thorough, Miss Hartwell. He met her eyes again. I'm not making threats. I'm stating facts. Your mother needs medication. You need employment. The Alpha King wants to help you. All you need to do is come meet him and accept his gratitude. From behind Elena, her mother coughed. The sound was wet, rattling, a reminder of everything she stood to lose. 1 hour, Elena heard herself say. I'll give him 1 hour. Then I'm coming home. Marcus smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Of course. The Mercedes drove for 45 minutes, leaving the cramped streets of the Hollows far behind. Elena watched the city transform through the tinted windows. The buildings grew taller, then shorter, then disappeared entirely as they reached the eastern edge of Silverpine. The road narrowed. Trees pressed close on either side, ancient oaks and towering pines that blocked out the moonlight. Then the forest opened, and Elena forgot how to breathe. The estate rose from the darkness like something out of a fever dream. It was massive, part mansion, part fortress, with stone walls that seemed to grow from the earth itself. Towers punctuated the structure at irregular intervals, their windows glowing with warm light. The architecture was old, European, the kind of building that had witnessed centuries of history. Wolves patrolled the grounds. Elena counted 6 in human form, dressed in black tactical gear, moving with military precision along the perimeter. But there were others, actual wolves, huge and dark-furred, weaving between the trees like shadows given life. Their eyes caught the headlights as the Mercedes passed, reflecting back in shades of amber and gold. Her hands were shaking again. She pressed them flat against her thighs to hide it. The car stopped before a massive oak door. Marcus opened her door personally, offering his hand to help her out. She ignored it, stepping onto the gravel drive on unsteady legs. This way. The interior of the estate was overwhelming. Marble floors stretched in every direction, gleaming under crystal chandeliers. Oil paintings lined the walls, portraits of men and women with hard faces and golden eyes. Generations of Alpha Kings and their mates, Elena realized. A dynasty built on power and blood. The scent hit her as they walked deeper into the mansion. Pine. Earth. Something wild and musky that made the hair on her arms stand up. It was the smell of predators. Of wolves. She didn't belong here. Marcus led her to a door at the end of a long corridor and knocked once. Enter. The voice was deep, resonant, familiar. Elena's heart stuttered. Marcus opened the door and stepped aside. The study was enormous, lined with books on 3 walls, weapons on the 4th. Swords, axes, daggers, all arranged with careful precision. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace large enough to stand in. The furniture was leather and dark wood, masculine, expensive. Behind a massive oak desk sat the man she had saved. He was transformed. The broken, bleeding stranger from the forest was gone. In his place was something else entirely, a predator in a perfectly tailored black suit, power radiating from him like heat from a flame. His dark hair was swept back from a face that was brutally handsome, all sharp angles and shadowed hollows. A thin scar traced his jawline, the only evidence of his recent injuries. But his eyes were the same. Molten gold, inhuman, fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. You. His voice was a deep rumble that she felt in her chest, in her bones. You're the one who saved me. Elena couldn't speak. Couldn't move. She felt pinned by that gaze, a rabbit frozen before a wolf. He stood slowly, unfolding from the chair with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for a man his size. He moved around the desk, each step deliberate, closing the distance between them until he stood close enough to touch. This close, she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He was bigger than she remembered. Taller. Broader. The kind of man who made the world feel small. I am Cain Blackwood, he said. Alpha King of the Eastern Territories. Blackwood. The name echoed in her head. She knew that name. Everyone knew that name. The Blackwood Pack didn't just rule werewolf society, they were werewolf society. Kings among wolves. And she had dragged their leader through the mud, bound his wounds with strips torn from her uniform, and left him at a public hospital like a stray dog. Her voice cracked. She tried again. I didn't know who you were. I just saw someone hurt. Anyone would have. No. His voice cut through her stammering. Not anyone. I was attacked by rogues, left to bleed out in the forest. My guards were 15 minutes behind me. If you hadn't stopped, I would have died. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. Elena flinched, but he didn't touch her. Just let his fingers hang there, inches from her cheek, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. You saved my life, Elena Hartwell. I pay my debts. The offer came then. Medical bills, all of them, paid in full. A new apartment, somewhere safe, somewhere warm. A job, not as a maid but as his personal assistant. The salary he named was more than she'd made in 3 years at Thornwood. One condition. She would live on the estate. She would be available whenever he needed her. The contract was for 1 year. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why would an Alpha King need a human assistant? Something flickered in those golden eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or something darker. Perhaps I want to keep you close, he said. To properly express my gratitude. She didn't believe him. There was something else here, something beneath the surface. But her mother's cough echoed in her memory. The empty medication bottle. The eviction notice that would arrive in days. 1 year, she said. 1 year. She signed the contract with trembling hands. Cain watched the ink dry on the paper, and a slow, dangerous smile crossed his face. Welcome to the pack, Elena. The words sent ice down her spine. Marcus appeared at her elbow to escort her out. As they walked through the corridor, 2 wolves passed them going the other direction, speaking in low voices. Is she really the one from the prophecy? If she is, the Alpha King has been searching for her for 10 years. Elena's steps faltered. But Marcus's hand was firm on her arm, guiding her forward, and the wolves were already gone. What have I done? If you are enjoying this video, do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 3. The cage was made of silk and marble, but it was still a cage. Elena stood on the balcony of her new room, watching the sun set over Blackwood Forest. The view was spectacular, endless trees painted in shades of amber and gold, the distant mountains catching the last light like sleeping giants. A cool breeze carried the scent of pine and wild things. Behind her, the room stretched in absurd luxury. A four-poster bed draped in cream linens. A bathroom larger than her mother's entire apartment, with a soaking tub and rainfall shower. A closet already filled with clothes in her exact size, clothes she hadn't chosen, hadn't asked for, couldn't possibly afford. She should feel grateful. Instead, she felt owned. Her mother had been moved that morning. Elena had watched from the Mercedes as the medical transport van carried Margaret Hartwell away to Silverpine Private Care, a facility so exclusive it didn't appear in any directory. The doctors there had taken one look at her mother's chart and started talking about treatments, therapies, procedures that would have cost more than Elena could earn in a lifetime. "Don't worry about payment," the administrator had said with a smile. "Mr. Blackwood has handled everything. Mr. Blackwood has handled everything." The words echoed in Elena's head as she gripped the balcony railing. Her mother was safe. Her mother was getting care she desperately needed. And all it had cost Elena was her freedom. A knock at the door made her turn. "Miss Hartwell?" A young woman's voice, nervous. "The Alpha King requests your presence in his office. You have 10 minutes. Elena looked down at her outfit, jeans and a sweater, the only clothes from her old life she'd been allowed to keep. Not appropriate for meeting an Alpha King. Good. Kane's office was on the 3rd floor of the East Wing, behind a door that looked like it could withstand a battering ram. Elena entered without knocking. He was standing by the window, silhouetted against the fading light. He'd shed his suit jacket, rolled his sleeves to the elbow, loosened his tie. The casual adjustments should have made him seem more approachable. They didn't. "You're early," he said without turning. "You said 10 minutes. Most people take 20. Time to prepare, to compose themselves." He turned then, those gold eyes finding hers. "But you're not most people, are you, Elena?" She didn't answer. Didn't know how. Kane moved to his desk, gesturing to a leather chair opposite. "Sit. We have much to discuss." For the next hour, he explained her duties. She would manage his schedule, meetings with pack alphas from across the Eastern Territories, calls from business associates, requests from the pack council. She would organize his correspondence, filter his appointments, act as a buffer between him and the endless demands on his time. "You'll have access to my private calendar," he said, sliding a tablet across the desk. "My contacts. My files. You'll know more about the inner workings of this pack than most wolves who were born into it." "Why?" He raised an eyebrow. "Why what? Why me? Why give a human that kind of access?" Something flickered in his eyes, there and gone before she could name it. "Because you've already proven you can be trusted with my life. Everything else is secondary." It was a good answer. A reasonable answer. Elena didn't believe a word of it. The days blurred together. Elena learned the rhythms of the estate: breakfast at 7, staff meetings at 8, Kane's first appointments at 9. She learned which pack alphas demanded immediate callbacks and which could wait. She learned to navigate the hierarchy of wolves who watched her with suspicion, curiosity, or outright hostility. She learned that Kane watched her constantly. He did it subtly, carefully. A glance across the conference table during meetings. A pause in conversation when she entered a room. Questions that seemed casual but probed deeper than they should, about her childhood, her dreams, the nightmares she'd never told anyone about. "Your father died when you were 10, he said one evening, reviewing documents while she organized his schedule. "I read the reports." "A rogue attack." Elena's hands stilled on the tablet. "Yes. Is that why you hate our kind?" "I don't hate your kind." The lie tasted bitter. "I just don't trust them." "And me?" He looked up, pinning her with those gold eyes. "Do you trust me?" The answer was no. Obviously no. But when his gaze held hers, when the heat of his presence seemed to fill the room, Elena found she couldn't speak at all. He smiled, slow and knowing. Progress. The woman appeared on Elena's fourth day. She was beautiful, the kind of beautiful that made other women feel like rough drafts. Tall and willowy, with raven hair cascading past her shoulders and eyes the color of winter ice. Her clothes were designer, her jewelry tasteful, her bearing that of someone who had never been refused anything in her life. She cornered Elena in the hallway outside Cain's office. "So you're the human." Her voice was silk over steel. "I'm Celeste Ravencroft. I assume he's mentioned me." He hadn't. Elena said nothing. Celeste's smile sharpened. "I've been by his side for 5 years. Waiting. Preparing. Do you know what a Luna is, human? The Alpha's mate. His queen. The most powerful position a female wolf can hold." She stepped closer, her scent, jasmine and something predatory, filling Elena's nose. "I was supposed to be chosen. Everyone knew it. And then you appear, and suddenly I don't exist. I'm just his assistant. Please." Celeste laughed, bitter and bright. "I've seen how he looks at you. Like you're something precious. Something his." Her eyes hardened. "Whatever you think is happening between you two, it's temporary. He has responsibilities to his pack, to his bloodline. He'll use you, human. And when he's finished, he'll discard you. Nothing is happening. Then you're either blind or stupid." Celeste leaned in, her whisper cutting. "Do you know what happens to humans who get involved with our kind? They break. Our world is too violent, too primal, too much for your fragile little bodies and hearts. Walk away while you still can." She was gone before Elena could respond, disappearing down the corridor in a swirl of designer fabric and barely contained rage. The training started on day 6. "The estate is dangerous," Cain said, leading her to a private gym in the basement. "Rogue attacks have increased in recent months. You need to be able to defend yourself. I thought that's what your guards were for. Guards can fail. Skills cannot." He tossed her a pair of fighting gloves. "Put these on." For 2 hours every evening, he taught her how to throw a punch, how to break a hold, how to use her size and speed against larger opponents. His hands on her body were professional, adjusting her stance, correcting her form, but every touch sent electricity crackling through her veins. She caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. Those gold eyes tracked her movements with an intensity that had nothing to do with combat training. The tension built like pressure before a storm. It broke on day 12. They'd been sparring for an hour, and Elena had finally managed to land a solid hit, her elbow connecting with his ribs in a move he'd taught her 3 days ago. The impact barely made him flinch, but pride surged through her anyway. "Good," he said, and the approval in his voice made her stomach flip. Again. She struck. He blocked. She spun, trying the combination he drilled into her, but he was faster, stronger, and in one fluid motion he had her pinned against the wall, her wrists captured above her head. They were both breathing hard. His body pressed against hers, all heat and muscle. His face was inches away, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his gold eyes. "You have no idea," he growled, "what you do to me." Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. She should push him away. Should remind him that she was his employee, that this was inappropriate, that nothing good could come from whatever was building between them. But her body refused to cooperate. His head lowered. She felt his breath on her lips. The door crashed open. "Alpha." Marcus's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Rogue attack on the southern border. 3 dead. They're still in the territory." Cain pulled away, his expression shuddering. Whatever had been burning in his eyes was gone, replaced by the cold mask of the Alpha King. "Mobilize the guard. I want patrols doubled." He didn't look at Elena as he strode from the room. "We finished this later." She wasn't sure if he meant the training or something else entirely. Sleep wouldn't come that night. Elena wandered the estate until she found herself in the library, a cavernous room stuffed with books that smelled of leather and age. She ran her fingers along the spines, reading titles in languages she didn't recognize. One book caught her attention. Old, bound in cracked leather, no title on the spine. She pulled it free and opened to a random page. The text was handwritten, faded but legible. Werewolf prophecies and bloodlines. She almost put it back. Almost. Instead, she read. Most of it was incomprehensible, references to ancient pacts, blood feuds, matings and markings. But one passage stopped her cold. When the cursed Alpha King finds the silver-eyed maiden who bears the mark of the moon, his redemption or destruction shall be complete. She will be his salvation or his doom. Elena's blood turned to ice. Silver eyes. She had silver-gray eyes. Everyone had always commented on how unusual they were. And on her left shoulder blade, hidden beneath her shirt, was a birthmark. Crescent-shaped. Her mother had always joked that she'd been kissed by the moon. The book fell from her numb fingers. She found him in his office the next morning, before the sun had fully risen. "What am I to you?" Cain looked up from his paperwork. "I beg your pardon?" "The prophecy." She slammed the ancient book on his desk. "Silver-eyed maiden. Mark of the moon. Is that why I'm here? Am I part of some werewolf destiny?" His expression gave nothing away. "You've been reading things you don't understand. Then help me understand." She leaned across the desk, heart pounding. "Did you give me this job because of what that book says? Have you been watching me because?" An alarm shattered the air. Cain was on his feet instantly, his body tensing, his eyes flashing pure gold. Through the window, Elena saw wolves sprinting across the grounds. "Breach," Marcus's voice crackled through an intercom. "Eastern perimeter. At least 12 rogues. Get her to the safe room," Cain ordered. He was already moving, already changing, his body rippling, expanding, fur erupting across his skin. The wolf that replaced him was massive. Black as midnight, gold-eyed, magnificent and terrifying. He crashed through the study window without slowing and disappeared into the chaos outside. Guards appeared, grabbed Elena, dragged her through corridors. The safe room was reinforced steel. Impenetrable. The rogues came through the wall. 3 wolves, gray and scarred and feral. They'd killed her guards in the hallway. Now they stalked toward her, hunger in their eyes. Elena fought. Everything Cain had taught her, she used. But she was human, and they were wolves, and when the largest one lunged. Black fur. Flashing teeth. Blood spraying across the walls. Cain tore through them like they were made of paper. His jaws crushed throats, his claws opened bellies. It was over in seconds. He shifted back. He stood over her, naked, covered in blood, his chest heaving. His eyes were wild, feral, barely human. "Mine," he snarled. The word echoed off the steel walls. Elena saw his eyes widen in horror at what he'd said. But she'd already understood. She wasn't just some human he was helping. She was his fated mate. If you are enjoying this video, do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 4. The words still echoed in Elena's ears. "Mine." She sat in Cain's private quarters, wrapped in a cashmere blanket that probably cost more than her old monthly rent. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again, the black wolf tearing through flesh, blood spraying in arterial arcs, the raw savagery of death delivered in seconds. And then the man. Naked. Covered in gore. Eyes burning gold with something that transcended violence. "Mine." The door opened. Cain entered, freshly showered, dressed in dark slacks and a gray sweater that shouldn't have made him look civilized but somehow did. The blood was gone. The wildness in his eyes was not. He stopped 3 feet from her chair. Kept his distance. As if he didn't trust himself to come closer. Ask, he said quietly. What did you mean? Her voice came out steadier than she expected. When you said, mine. He spoke the word like it hurt him. You know what I meant, Elena. You've known since you read that prophecy. I want to hear you say it. Silence stretched between them. Cain moved to the window, staring out at the grounds where his wolves were still patrolling, still searching for any rogues that might have escaped. You're my fated mate. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Werewolf legend speaks of a bond that transcends choice, he continued, his back still turned. Every alpha has one perfect match. One soul that completes their own. Written in our blood, in our bones, in the very essence of what we are. He turned to face her. I've been searching for you for 10 years. Since the day I became Alpha King at 21. The prophecy said my mate would save my life. A bitter smile crossed his face. And you did. In a forest, with strips torn from your uniform, not knowing what I was. Elena's mind raced. That's why you gave me this job. Why you've been watching me, asking questions, finding excuses to be near you. Yes. No apology in his voice. No shame. I've waited a decade, Elena. Do you understand what that means? To know your other half exists somewhere in the world and not be able to find her? To search every crowd, follow every lead, and come up empty again and again? She should be angry. She should feel manipulated, deceived. Instead, she felt something else, something that frightened her far more than anger. Understanding. There's more, she said. It wasn't a question. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the shadows behind his eyes. Tell me all of it. Cain's jaw tightened. My father was the previous Alpha King. A powerful man. A terrible one. He made a deal with a witch named Morgana, dark magic in exchange for power. It worked. For years, it worked. His hands clenched at his sides. But dark magic always demands payment. When I challenged him for the throne, when I killed him, the witch transferred the curse to me. What kind of curse? Every full moon, I lose control of my wolf. The words came out flat, clinical, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. I become a mindless beast. No thought, no reason, only rage and hunger. I have to be chained in the basement, wrapped in silver that burns my flesh, while the monster takes over. Elena's stomach turned. Every month? Every month for 11 years. He met her eyes. The curse can only be broken one way. The love of my true mate. If it isn't broken by my 32nd birthday, he paused. 6 months from now, I'll be lost to the beast forever. There won't be enough of me left to save. The weight of it crashed over her. This wasn't just a fairy tale bond, a romantic destiny. This was a death sentence with a ticking clock. And me, she whispered. What happens to me in all this? You're free to leave. The words seemed to cost him something. I won't force the bond on you. I won't guilt you or manipulate you or, he stopped, collected himself. But if you stay. If you choose to accept me as your mate, you'll become my Luna Queen. Bound to me for life. For eternity, eventually. And if I don't? If I walk away? Something shattered behind his eyes. Then I'll die in 6 months, lost to madness. And you'll live your life knowing you were the one person who could have saved me. It was cruel. Impossibly cruel. Not because he meant it to be, but because it was true. Elena felt the pull toward him, had felt it since the moment she dragged his bleeding body through the forest. Something primal. Something that didn't care about logic or fear or the memory of her father's blood on rogue claws. I need time, she said. You have 6 months. His voice was hollow. Take all the time you need. The knock came an hour later. Marcus entered without waiting for permission, his face grim. We've identified the rogues. They're not random, they're organized. Cain straightened. By whom? A pause. Marcus's eyes flickered to Elena, then back to his alpha. Your brother. Damien. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Damien is behind this? Cain's voice was dangerously quiet. He's allied with Morgana. The witch. Marcus's jaw worked. They're working together to ensure the curse isn't broken. If you lose yourself to the beast, Damien takes the throne. And they know about her. He nodded toward Elena. They'll kill her before they let the bond complete. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Kill me? You're the key to breaking the curse, Marcus said bluntly. Without you, Cain is doomed. Without Cain, Damien becomes Alpha King. It's simple mathematics. How did they find out about her? Cain demanded. Someone in the pack is feeding them information. We don't know who yet. Marcus's expression hardened. Until we identify the traitor, Elena can't leave the estate. She'll need guards at all times. Another cage. Another set of walls closing in. Elena wanted to scream. She wanted to run back to her tiny apartment in the Hollows and pretend none of this had ever happened. But her mother was in that medical facility, receiving treatment that was keeping her alive. And somewhere in her chest, a thread she didn't understand was already winding itself around her heart. The days that followed were suffocating. Guards flanked her everywhere. Celeste appeared at every opportunity, her beautiful face twisted with barely concealed hatred. You're putting the entire pack at risk, she hissed during one encounter. A human Luna is an abomination. The pack will never accept you. I'm not anyone's Luna. Not yet. Celeste's smile was razor sharp. But you're considering it, aren't you? I can see it in your eyes. The mighty Elena, savior of the Alpha King, weighing whether to grace us with her presence. She leaned close. He'll tire of you. They always tire of humans. You break too easily. But at night, Cain came to her. Not to seduce her. Not to pressure her. Just to talk. He sat on her balcony with her, watching the stars wheel overhead, and told her things she suspected he'd never told anyone. About his childhood in this very estate, raised by a father who saw children as tools for power. About his mother, who died trying to protect him from his father's rages. About the night he finally challenged the old Alpha, 19 years old, terrified, certain he would die. I didn't want to kill him, Cain said quietly. Even after everything he'd done. He was still my father. His hands opened and closed on his knees. But he'd started executing wolves who questioned him. Families. Children. I had no choice. That's when the curse transferred. Morgana was watching. She'd loved my father, in her twisted way. Losing him broke something in her. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. So she broke something in me. Elena studied his profile in the moonlight. The hard lines of his jaw, the shadows under his eyes. You're not a monster, she said. You haven't seen me on a full moon. I've seen you tear 3 wolves apart with your bare hands to save my life. She waited until he looked at her. That's not a monster. That's a man protecting what's his. Something shifted in his golden eyes. Something hungry and desperate and achingly vulnerable. You make me feel human, he whispered. You're the only one who ever has. 3 nights later, they sat on the balcony again. The moon was a silver sliver in the sky. The forest rustled with night sounds, owls, crickets, wolves on patrol. Elena had grown used to the sounds, to the wildness that surrounded this place. She'd grown used to him. Cain turned to her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. I've waited so long for you, he said. His hand rose, cupping her face with impossible gentleness. But I won't take what isn't freely given. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Every logical part of her brain screamed warnings. Her father, the rogues, the curse, the impossibility of binding herself to this world. But logic had nothing to do with what she felt. She closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his. Electricity. Fire. Something cosmic and inevitable crashing through her veins. Cain groaned against her mouth, his hands sliding into her hair, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, desperate, hungry, years of loneliness pouring out of both of them. Elena felt something awakening in her chest, a golden warmth spreading through her body, connecting her to him in ways she couldn't explain. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Cain's eyes were wide with wonder. "You've accepted the first stage of the bond," he breathed. Elena felt it. A thread of gold running from her heart to his. Awareness of his emotions, joy, disbelief, desperate hope. She could sense his presence like a second heartbeat. "This is real," she whispered. "It's real." He pressed his forehead to hers. "It's finally real." That night, Elena dreamed. But it wasn't her dream. She saw through Cain's eyes. Felt his emotions as if they were her own. She experienced his memory of the night he killed his father, the terror, the necessity, the grief that still haunted him. She felt the curse take hold, the monthly agony of silver burning his flesh while the beast raged inside him. She saw him searching for her face in crowds, in photographs, in the features of every silver-eyed woman he encountered. Years of desperate hope. Years of crushing disappointment. She woke with tears streaming down her face. The bond was showing her his soul. Morning light streamed through the windows. Elena dressed quickly, her mind racing. She needed to talk to him, needed to understand what she'd experienced, needed. She pushed open the door to his office. And froze. Celeste was wrapped around Cain like a vine, her lips pressed to his, her fingers tangled in his hair. Time stopped. Cain shoved her away, his face twisted with anger, but the image was already burned into Elena's brain. Celeste looked over his shoulder, directly at Elena, and smiled. Deliberate. Calculated. A performance designed to destroy. Betrayal cut through Elena like a blade. The bond made it worse. She could feel Cain's panic, his desperation, emotions flooding through the golden thread. "Elena," he started. The door burst open behind her. Marcus's face was pale. "Elena's mother has collapsed at the medical facility. It's critical." If you are enjoying this video, do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 5. Her mother was dying. Elena burst through the doors of Silverpine Private Care, Cain a step behind her, his weakness from what Celeste had done forgotten in the urgency of the moment. The sterile white corridors blurred past as she ran toward the intensive care unit, following the signs, following her terror. The room was a nightmare of machines and beeping monitors. Margaret Hartwell lay motionless in the bed, her skin the color of ash, tubes running from her arms, her nose, her chest. A ventilator pushed air into lungs that had apparently forgotten how to breathe on their own. The heart monitor showed a rhythm that even Elena could tell was wrong, erratic, struggling, failing. What happened? Elena grabbed the nearest doctor, a tired-looking woman with sympathetic eyes. She was stable. She was getting better. "Miss Hartwell, I'm Dr. Chen." The woman guided her away from the bed with gentle hands. "Your mother was poisoned. Wolfsbane mixed into her evening medication." The word didn't register at first. "Wolfsbane? It's lethal to werewolves," Cain said from behind her, his voice tight with fury. "And highly toxic to humans. Someone deliberately tried to kill her." Elena finished the sentence, her voice hollow. "To get to me." Dr. Chen's expression confirmed it. "We've neutralized what we can, but the damage to her organs is extensive." "I'm sorry, Miss Hartwell. There's no antidote readily available. We're doing everything possible, but you should prepare yourself." Prepare herself. For her mother to die. Because Elena had saved a stranger in a forest, because she'd gotten tangled up in a world of wolves and curses and prophecies. Her knees buckled. Cain caught her before she hit the floor. His arms wrapped around her, solid and warm, and she heard his voice in her ear, low, urgent, certain. "There's another way." The doctors argued. The nurses protested. Even Marcus, who had arrived minutes after them, tried to intervene. Cain ignored them all. "Alpha blood can heal almost any wound," he explained, rolling up his sleeve. "It's why we're so hard to kill. But sharing it costs the alpha. Weakens them for days, sometimes weeks. And it creates a permanent link between the alpha and the recipient." "You can't," Marcus said flatly. "Not now. Not with Damien plotting against you. You'll be vulnerable. She's Elena's mother." Cain's voice brooked no argument. "She's dying because of me. Because my enemies wanted to hurt my mate." He didn't wait for permission. He shifted his hand just enough for claws to extend, and he drew them across his wrist. Blood welled up, darker than human blood, almost black in the fluorescent light. Cain moved to Margaret's bedside and tilted his wrist over her mouth. The blood dripped between her parted lips. The effect was immediate. Color flooded back into Margaret's cheeks. The heart monitor steadied, its erratic rhythm smoothing into something strong and regular. Her breathing deepened, the ventilator suddenly unnecessary as her lungs remembered their purpose. Cain staggered. Elena caught him this time, bracing herself against his weight. He was pale, trembling, the vitality that usually radiated from him dimmed like a candle in a storm. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice was thin. "Just need to sit." She helped him to a chair, her heart torn between gratitude and terror. He'd saved her mother. He'd left himself defenseless to do it. For her. Margaret woke 6 hours later. Her eyes fluttered open, confused at first, taking in the hospital room, the machines, her daughter's tear-streaked face. Then confusion gave way to clarity, and she squeezed Elena's hand with surprising strength. "You look terrible," Margaret said. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "What happened?" Elena told her everything. The mate bond. The curse. Damien and Morgana and the rogues who wanted her dead. She expected her mother to be horrified, to demand they flee, to reject this impossible world Elena had stumbled into. Instead, Margaret listened quietly. When Elena finished, her mother was silent for a long moment. "Your father would have wanted you to choose your own path," she finally said. "He believed in that more than anything, the right to decide who you love, who you become." Her eyes drifted to where Cain sat in the corner, still pale but watching over them like a guardian. "But I see the way you look at him, Elena. That's not obligation. That's not gratitude. Mom. That's love." Margaret's grip tightened on her daughter's hand. "Don't let fear steal that from you. Life is too short, too fragile. I almost died today knowing you were still running from your own heart. Don't make me die for real with that same regret." Elena's breath caught. Her mother was right. Somewhere between the forest and this moment, between blood and fear and stolen conversations on moonlit balconies, she'd fallen in love with Cain Blackwood. The curse. The danger. The impossibility of it all. None of it mattered. She loved him anyway. The traitor was found within hours. Derek, a wolf nurse who had worked at the facility for 3 years, broke under Marcus's interrogation. Damien had paid him, not in money, but in promises. A higher position in the new pack. Power. Status. "He's planning a coup," Derek gasped, blood dripping from his broken nose. "During the next full moon. When the alpha is chained. When he can't fight back." Marcus's face was stone. "How many rogues?" 50. Maybe more. And the witch. Morgana will be there to make sure the curse holds, to make sure the beast takes him permanently. Elena stood in the doorway, listening. 5 days until the full moon. 5 days until Damien attacked. 5 days to complete the bond and break the curse. It wasn't enough time. It had to be. She found Celeste waiting in the corridor outside her room. The woman's face was tear-streaked, her perfect composure finally cracked. She stepped into Elena's path, hands clasped in front of her like a penitent. I need to tell you something. I have nothing to say to you. Elena moved to push past her. I'm pregnant. The words stopped her cold. Cain's child, Celeste continued, tears streaming freely now. We were together 3 months ago, before you appeared. He was going to choose me as his Luna. Everyone knew it. And then you came out of nowhere, and suddenly I didn't exist. Elena's world tilted. You're lying. I'm not. Celeste's hand moved to her stomach, protective, possessive. I'm carrying the Alpha King's heir. My child will be illegitimate now because of you. Cast aside. Ignored. All because some human stumbled into our world and ruined everything I'd worked for. The bond. Elena reached for it, reached for Cain's emotions, trying to sense truth or deception. But doubt was a poison of its own. And it was already spreading through her veins. Cain denied it. Vehemently. Absolutely. I haven't touched Celeste in over a year, he said, pacing his office like a caged animal. The child isn't mine. It can't be. She says. I don't care what she says. He stopped, turning to face her. Elena, look at me. Feel the bond. You know I'm telling the truth. She did feel it. His sincerity, his desperation, his fear of losing her. But she'd also heard stories, bonds manipulated by magic, hearts deceived by hope. Pack law requires a blood test, Marcus said quietly from the doorway. To determine paternity officially. It takes 3 days. 3 days. Half their remaining time, eaten up by doubt and accusations. Do it, Cain said. Do whatever it takes to prove the truth. Marcus worked through the nights. He dug into Celeste's claim with the methodical precision of a man who had spent decades uncovering lies. Medical records. Financial transactions. Travel logs. The picture that emerged was damning, but not in the way Celeste had intended. Her pregnancy is 8 weeks along, Marcus reported. But she claims conception was 12 weeks ago. The dates don't match. Elena's heart stuttered. What does that mean? It means she's lying about when she conceived. And look at this. He slid a document across the table. Medical records show she visited Morgana the witch 6 weeks ago. Morgana is skilled in illusion magic. Dark fertility spells. The pregnancy is fake? The pregnancy might be real, but it's not Cain's. I believe Celeste is working with Damien and Morgana. The whole thing is designed to drive a wedge between you and Cain before the full moon. Break your trust. Prevent the bond from completing. The blood test results arrived on the 3rd day. Cain was not the father. Celeste broke. Her composure shattered like glass, and the truth poured out in jagged confessions. Damien had promised her everything, Luna Queen when he took power, status beyond her dreams. All she had to do was destroy Cain's relationship with his mate. The pregnancy was Morgana's spell, she sobbed as guards dragged her away. An illusion. It would have faded in another week anyway. Elena watched her go, feeling hollow. She should feel vindicated. Instead, she felt guilty. She'd doubted Cain. She'd let fear poison what they'd built. 3 days wasted. 2 remaining until the full moon. She was on her balcony when he found her. The moon hung heavy in the sky, nearly full, a reminder of the countdown they couldn't escape. Elena didn't turn when she heard his footsteps, didn't speak when he stopped beside her. I understand if you can't trust me. His voice was quiet, defeated. This world is brutal and full of deception. You've been lied to and manipulated since the moment you entered it. Elena finally looked at him. The vulnerability in his eyes broke something inside her. I felt your truth through the bond, she admitted. The whole time, I felt it. But I was scared. This is all happening so fast. A month ago, I was scrubbing floors and counting coins for medication. Now I'm supposed to be a Luna queen, bound to a world that terrifies me. Cain took her hands. His grip was gentle, warm, certain. We have time, he said. We don't have to complete the bond before the full moon. I won't risk you just to save myself. And if the curse takes you? Then it takes me. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I've lived with this darkness for 11 years. I can survive another month, another year, until you're ready. But they both knew that wasn't true. Damien was coming. The coup was planned. If the curse wasn't broken before the full moon, there might not be another chance. Elena looked at the man before her. The Alpha King who had bled for her mother, who had waited a decade to find her, who was willing to die rather than pressure her into a choice she wasn't ready to make. She loved him. It was that simple. That terrifying. That real. I choose you, she whispered. Not because I have to. Because I want to. The relief and love that flooded through the bond took her breath away. Cain's hands cupped her face. His eyes blazed gold. He leaned in. The explosion shattered the night. Flames erupted from the eastern wing, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Screams rose from the grounds. Through the smoke and chaos, Elena saw a figure standing at the tree line. A man who looked almost identical to Cain. But with cruel, cold eyes. Damien. Behind him, dozens of wolves emerged from the shadows. An army of rogues, teeth bared, ready for blood. Damien's voice boomed across the grounds, cutting through the chaos like a blade. Give me the girl and I'll let the pack live. The human dies, or everyone does. If you are enjoying this video, do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 6. The world was on fire. Elena pressed herself against the window of Cain's quarters, watching the estate grounds transform into a battlefield. Wolves clashed everywhere, black and gray and brown fur matted with blood, teeth flashing in the firelight, screams and howls tearing through the night. Damien had brought an army. Over 100 rogues poured through the shattered perimeter, savage and relentless, trained killers with nothing to lose and everything to gain. They crashed against Cain's pack like waves against rock, and the rock was beginning to crack. A massive black wolf, Cain, launched himself into the heart of the chaos. Even from this distance, Elena could feel his fury through the bond, a storm of protective rage that made her own blood sing. He was magnificent and terrifying, tearing through rogues like they were made of paper. But there were so many of them. Miss Hartwell. Marcus appeared at her elbow, his face grim. The safe room. Now. No. This isn't a request. I said no. Elena turned to face him. I'm not hiding in a steel box while people die for me. Give me a weapon. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, respect, perhaps, or recognition of something he hadn't expected to find in a human. He reached into his jacket and withdrew 2 silver knives, their edges gleaming with deadly promise. Silver kills werewolves, he said, pressing them into her hands. Aim for the heart or throat. And for God's sake, don't die. Cain will never forgive me. The safe room was supposed to be impenetrable. It wasn't. Elena heard them coming before they breached the wall, the scrape of claws on steel, the grunt of effort, the sick satisfaction in their growls. 3 rogues, gray-furred and scarred, poured through the hole they'd torn in what should have been reinforced metal. The guards who'd been protecting her were dead in the hallway. She was alone. The first rogue shifted to human form, a man with cruel eyes and a smile that promised pain. The Alpha King's little pet. Damien's going to be so pleased. Elena's hands trembled around the silver knives. But her voice was steady. Come and get me, then. He laughed. They all did. 3 werewolves against 1 human woman. The outcome was obvious. They were wrong. Cain had trained her. Hours in the gym, his hands guiding her movements, his voice in her ear teaching her to fight dirty, to use her size, to strike where they least expected. Werewolves were stronger, faster, nearly impossible to kill. But they were also arrogant. They underestimated humans. And that was a fatal mistake. The first rogue lunged. Elena sidestepped, driving her knife into the soft flesh beneath his arm, angling up toward his heart. Silver met werewolf blood, and he dropped with a look of absolute shock on his face. The second came faster, having learned from his companion's death. Elena ducked under his swing, spun, and slashed across his throat. Not deep enough to kill instantly, but deep enough to slow him down, to make him clutch at the wound, spraying blood across the floor. 2 down. 1 to go. But the third was smarter. He didn't charge. He circled, watching her with predator's eyes, waiting for her to make a mistake. She made one. Her foot slipped in the blood pooling on the floor. Just a fraction of a second, a momentary loss of balance. It was enough. He hit her like a freight train, slamming her against the wall, claws raking down her side. Pain exploded through her ribs, white-hot, blinding. She felt her own blood spill, warm and wet against her skin. The rogue's jaws opened, aimed at her throat. Black fur. Flashing teeth. A roar that shook the walls. Cain tore through the rogue like vengeance given form. One moment the wolf was about to kill her, the next, he was scattered across the floor in pieces. Cain shifted back, naked and bloody, his eyes wild with terror as he caught Elena before she could fall. "You're hurt." His voice cracked. "You're bleeding. You could have been killed. Had to try." Her words came out slurred. The pain was making everything fuzzy. Couldn't just hide. He carried her to his quarters, kicking through the ruined door, laying her on the bed with impossible gentleness. His hands shook as he tore fabric for bandages, as he cleaned the wound, as he bound her ribs with a care that seemed wrong from someone who had just dismembered 3 wolves. "I can't lose you," he growled. "Do you understand? I waited a decade. I finally found you. I can't." Elena reached up, touching his blood-streaked face. "Then let's complete the bond." He froze. "Elena. Give me your strength, and I'll give you mine." She pulled herself up despite the pain, meeting his golden eyes. "Together, we end this. Tonight." Completing the mate bond required both physical and spiritual union. Cain hesitated, even as his whole body trembled with the need to claim her. "It's reckless. The transition will make you vulnerable. If something goes wrong." "Something's already wrong." Elena gestured to the chaos beyond the walls, the sounds of battle, the screams of dying wolves. "Damien won't stop. The curse won't break. We're out of time, Cain." "I know, but..." She pulled him down and kissed him. Not gently. Not tentatively. This kiss was fire and desperation, a declaration of war against everything trying to keep them apart. She poured her choice into it, her certainty, her love. Cain groaned against her mouth, his resistance shattering. His hands found her waist, careful of her wound, pulling her closer. The bond between them pulsed with golden light, demanding completion. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her lips. "I've never been more sure of anything." What followed was sacred. Elena had expected passion, she got that and more. But she hadn't expected the spiritual dimension, the way their souls seemed to reach for each other as their bodies joined. She felt Cain's essence merge with hers, his strength flowing into her blood, her humanity reaching into him and finding the man beneath the beast. The curse met her spirit and cracked. 11 years of darkness, of monthly torment, of a beast clawing at the edges of Cain's soul, all of it encountered something it couldn't overcome. Her love. Her choice. Her absolute acceptance of everything he was. Golden light erupted from their intertwined forms. It blazed through the walls, visible across the entire estate. Every wolf on the grounds felt it, the power of a completed mate bond, the first in decades, an alpha king finally united with his true Luna. And Alayna transformed. Not into a wolf. She couldn't shift, would never shift. But she was no longer fully human either. Her senses sharpened until she could hear heartbeats through walls, smell the difference between friend and enemy. Strength flooded her limbs, healing her wound, filling her with power she'd never imagined. She was the bridge between worlds. When she opened her eyes, Cain was staring at her with something like awe. "Your eyes," he breathed. "Alayna, your eyes." She caught her reflection in the window. Her silver-gray irises now held flecks of gold, Cain's mark on her soul, visible for all to see. She was his Luna Queen. And she had never felt more powerful. They emerged from his quarters to find the battle at its tipping point. Cain's warriors were holding, but barely. Bodies littered the grounds, too many bodies, from both sides. The rogues kept coming, relentless, driven by Damien's promises of power. Then the pack saw their Luna. The roar that rose was triumphant, primal, a sound that shook the very foundations of the estate. Alayna felt it through the bond, every wolf in Cain's pack, suddenly stronger, suddenly certain, their alpha's completed bond flooding them with renewed purpose. Cain shifted and launched himself back into the fray with terrifying ferocity. He was no longer holding back, no longer divided. His mate was protected by the bond itself, and he could finally unleash everything he'd been restraining. The tide turned. Rogues fell by the dozens. The pack pushed forward, reclaiming ground, driving the invaders back toward the tree line. Victory was within reach. Then Damien appeared. He shifted from gray wolf to human form, standing in the center of the battlefield, blood-soaked and furious. His cold eyes found Cain. "Alpha challenge," Damien shouted, his voice carrying across the grounds. "Brother against brother. Fight to the death for the throne. The old way. The sacred way." A challenge that couldn't be refused without the Alpha appearing weak, without his authority crumbling. Every wolf stopped fighting. A circle formed, pack and rogues alike, enemies standing side by side, honoring the ancient ritual. Two brothers would enter. Only one would emerge. Cain shifted back to human, facing his brother across 20 feet of blood-soaked earth. "You could have been part of this," Cain said. "You could have been my second, my trusted advisor. Instead, you chose betrayal. I chose power." Damien's smile was cruel. "Something you were always too weak to truly grasp." They shifted simultaneously. The battle was savage. Two alpha wolves, nearly identical in size, trained from birth to kill. They tore into each other with claws and fangs, blood spraying across the ground. The sound of it was horrific, snarls and yelps and the wet crack of flesh meeting tooth. Alayna felt every wound Cain received through the bond. A claw across his shoulder, she gasped. Teeth sinking into his flank, she cried out. The pain was excruciating, overwhelming. But she didn't just receive. She sent. Her strength. Her love. Her absolute faith in him. She poured it through the bond like light through a window, and she felt him catch it, felt him draw on it. It made the difference. Cain drove Damien to the ground, his jaws clamping around his brother's throat. One bite, and it would be over. One bite. No. The scream came from the shadows. Morgana the witch emerged, her hands raised, ancient words spilling from her lips. Dark magic crackled in the air, wrapping around Damien, strengthening him, breaking every sacred rule of an alpha challenge. Damien surged up, throwing Cain off, the witch's power flowing through him like poison. Morgana's chanting reached a crescendo. Her hands thrust forward, and a bolt of pure death, a killing curse older than the pack itself, lanced toward Cain. Alayna didn't think. She threw herself between them. The curse hit her chest. It should have killed her instantly. Any living thing touched by that magic should have dropped dead before they hit the ground. But Alayna wasn't any living thing. She was the silver-eyed maiden from the prophecy. She was marked by the moon. She was bonded to the cursed Alpha King, his blood running through her veins. The curse entered her body and met something it didn't expect. The mate bond blazed to life, golden and furious. Her mixed essence, human and alpha intertwined, surrounded the dark magic like antibodies around a virus. The prophecy awakened in her blood. Elena screamed. Magic exploded from her in a wave of silver and gold, a blast that threw Morgana backward, shattering her concentration, breaking her connection to Damien. The witch hit a tree with a crack of breaking bones and didn't get up. Silence fell across the battlefield. Elena looked at her hands. Silver fire danced across her palms, power that shouldn't exist, magic born from the impossible union of human and wolf. It didn't burn. It sang. She turned to Morgana, who was struggling to rise, fear replacing arrogance in her ancient eyes. Elena's voice wasn't entirely her own. It carried weight, power, the echo of something greater than herself. You cursed the wrong bloodline. If you are enjoying this video, do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 7. Power sang through Elena's veins like liquid moonlight. She stood in the center of the battlefield, silver fire dancing across her skin, and she had never felt more alive. The flames didn't burn, they completed her, filled spaces she hadn't known were empty. Every nerve ending hummed with energy that was ancient, primal, impossibly right. Around her, wolves from both sides had frozen. Pack and rogues alike stared at the human woman who was no longer quite human, their eyes reflecting the silver gold light that poured from her hands. Morgana scrambled backward through the blood-soaked dirt, her ancient face twisted with genuine terror. Impossible, she hissed, her voice cracking. The Moon Witch bloodline was extinct. Destroyed centuries ago. Moon Witch. The words resonated somewhere deep in Elena's soul, unlocking memories that weren't quite memories, knowledge passed down through blood, dormant for generations, waiting for the right catalyst to awaken. Her ancestors had been bridges between worlds. Human women who carried the moon's blessing, who could walk between the mundane and supernatural, who served as healers and protectors. The bloodline had been hunted to extinction by those who feared its power. But not quite extinct. Hidden. Sleeping. Waiting. Bonding with a cursed Alpha King had been the key. Elena advanced on the witch, her bare feet leaving scorch marks in the earth. She didn't understand everything that was happening to her, but she understood enough. The power knew what to do, even if her conscious mind was still catching up. Break the curse, Elena said. Her voice carried echoes, harmonics that weren't entirely human. Break what you placed on Cain. Now. Morgana laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You think I wanted to curse the Blackwood line? The witch's eyes darted to where Cain stood in wolf form, blood matting his black fur. His father threatened my daughter's life. Torture. Death. Worse. He demanded power, and I had no choice but to give it. The fire in Elena's hands flickered. You cursed an innocent man for his father's sins. When Cain killed the old Alpha, the curse transferred as payment. Blood magic doesn't care about justice. Morgana's smile was ugly, desperate. It's a simple equation, only death or true love can break it. Kill me, and the curse becomes permanent. Your precious mate will be lost to the beast forever. Stalemate. Elena's flames dimmed as the reality sank in. She couldn't destroy Morgana without destroying Cain. The witch knew it, was counting on it, using her own life as a shield. There's another way. Cain's voice. He had shifted back to human form, standing naked and bloodied but unbowed. His golden eyes met Elena's across the circle of watching wolves. The curse feeds on darkness, he continued, walking toward her. Rage. Violence. Guilt. Everything I've carried since the night I killed my father. He stopped in front of her, close enough to touch. But you've changed that, Elena. You've changed me. What are you saying? If I let go of the darkness, truly let go, the curse will have nothing left to feed on. His jaw tightened. I have to forgive him. Forgive myself. Accept what you've brought into my life without reservation. Elena understood what he wasn't saying. For a warrior, for an alpha king who had survived by building walls around his heart, this was harder than any physical battle. It required perfect vulnerability, complete surrender. It required him to break open in front of his entire pack. She took his hands. The silver fire flowed around their joined fingers, warm and welcoming. Then let's do it together. Every eye was on them. Pack and rogues, warriors and wounded, the living and the dying. All watched as their alpha king stood hand in hand with his Luna in the center of the battlefield, beginning a ritual no one had witnessed in living memory. Elena reached through the mate bond, feeling Cain's emotions as clearly as her own. Fear. Shame. The weight of 11 years of darkness pressing down on him like a physical force. But beneath all of it, love. Bright and fierce and absolutely certain. You are not your father, she said, pouring her conviction through their connection. You are not the monster he tried to make you. I killed him. Cain's voice cracked. I put my hands around his throat and... You saved your pack. You stopped a tyrant. You did what had to be done, and you've carried that burden alone ever since. She squeezed his hands. But you're not alone anymore. Tears gathered in Cain's eyes. His pack had never seen him cry, the mighty Alpha King, brought low by emotion. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others watched with dawning understanding. I see who you really are, Elena continued. The man who bled himself pale to save my mother. The leader who protects his people with everything he has. The mate who treats me as an equal, not a possession. Her voice softened. Let it go, Cain. All of it. Forgive yourself. You've earned it. Something cracked open in Cain's chest. Years of guilt poured out, the memory of his father's eyes as life left them, the monthly torment of losing himself to the beast, the loneliness of searching for a mate who might not exist. Elena felt it all through the bond, absorbed it, transformed it with her love. The curse mark on Cain's chest, a black wolf twisted in agony, branded into his skin since the night he'd killed his father, began to fracture. Silver gold light seeped through the cracks, the same light that radiated from Elena's hands. The curse fought back, flooding Cain with visions of violence, trying to trigger the rage it needed to survive. Kill her, it whispered in his mind. She'll betray you like everyone else. Kill her before she can hurt you. Elena felt the assault through their bond. She stepped closer, pressing her forehead to his, wrapping him in her presence. You don't own him anymore, she said, not to Cain, but to the darkness itself. Her moon witch power met the blood magic head-on, light against shadow. He's mine. The curse screamed. With a final, defiant crack, it shattered. Cain collapsed to his knees, gasping. For a moment, Elena thought something had gone wrong, but then she felt it through the bond. Peace. Wholeness. A silence where the beast's constant screaming had lived for over a decade. He looked up at her with wonder, with devotion, with something that made her heart ache. You saved me, he whispered. In every way a person can be saved. Around them, the pack erupted. Howls of triumph split the night sky, wolf after wolf throwing back their heads to celebrate their alpha's freedom. The sound was deafening, primal, beautiful. Even some of the rogues joined in, swept up in the magnitude of what they'd witnessed. Elena helped Cain to his feet, her silver fire finally dimming to a warm glow beneath her skin. The power was still there, waiting, but it no longer demanded release. She had become what she was always meant to be. Damien attacked without warning. One moment he was lying defeated on the ground. The next, he was a gray blur of desperate fury, launching himself directly at Elena with claws extended and madness in his eyes. If I can't have the throne, he can't have you. He never reached her. The entire pack converged, wolves shifting mid-leap, human warriors drawing weapons. Even some of Damien's own rogues turned on him, unwilling to cross the sacred line of attacking Aluna. But it was Marcus who got there first, his wolf form slamming into Damien with the force of absolute loyalty. They rolled across the ground, snapping and clawing. Marcus was smaller than an alpha, but he fought with the precision of a warrior who had spent 30 years protecting the Blackwood line. Within moments, Damien was pinned, Marcus's jaws around his throat. One bite, and it would be over. Wait. Cain's voice cut through the chaos. He walked forward, fully in command despite his nakedness, despite the exhaustion that lined his face. Hold him. Marcus didn't release, but he didn't bite down either. Cain stood over his brother, looking down at the wolf who had tried to destroy everything he loved. Damien shifted back to human form, Marcus's teeth now pressed against his vulnerable throat. Do it, Damien whispered. Blood trickled from his mouth. Finish it. Why? The words seemed dragged from Cain's chest. We were brothers. We could have built something together. Why? Something cracked in Damien's expression, the madness fading, replaced by something raw and broken. Father. The word was barely audible. I just wanted him to see me the way he saw you. His air. His pride. But I was always second. Always invisible. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. I wanted to matter. Elena felt Cain's emotions through the bond, anger, grief, and beneath it all, a terrible pity. Damien had been shaped by the same cruel father, warped by the same toxic legacy. Different choices, but the same wounds. Pack law demanded death for treason. For attacking Aluna. For bringing war to the Pack's doorstep. Cain made a different choice. Exile, he said. Leave these territories and never return. If you set foot in the East again, I will kill you myself. No trial. No mercy. But today, he took a breath. Today you live. Marcus released Damien, stepping back with a growl of barely contained protest. Some of the pack stirred, unhappy with the verdict. They wanted blood for what had been done. But Elena stepped forward, standing beside her mate, supporting his decision with her presence. Some cycles of violence need to be broken, she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. Let this be the end of it. Damien was dragged away, stripped of his rank, marked with scars that would identify him as an exile to every pack in the world. He didn't fight. The madness had burned out of him, leaving only emptiness. Morgana had already fled, slipping away during the chaos, disappearing into the supernatural underworld. They would deal with her eventually. But not tonight. Tonight, the war was over. Dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. Elena moved among the wounded, her hands glowing with soft silver light. The moon witch power flowed through her, soothing pain, mending flesh. She didn't fully understand how it worked, but her body knew, her blood remembered. The pack watched their Luna heal their injured, and something shifted. The last traces of suspicion melted away. She wasn't the human who had stumbled into their world, she was the moon witch who had saved their alpha, who had broken an ancient curse, who was tending their wounds with magic no one had seen in centuries. She was theirs. And they were hers. A week later, Elena stood on the highest balcony with Cain. Below, the pack ran through the moonlit forest, free, joyful, alive. The full moon hung heavy and silver above them, the first since the curse had shattered. Cain didn't need chains anymore. He stood beside her, fully in control, human and wolf finally in harmony. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. I keep expecting to wake up, he murmured. To find out this was all a dream. It's real. She turned in his arms, looking up at his face. All of it. The moon's light washed over her, and suddenly Elena gasped. Something was happening. The bond between them pulsed, shifted, changed. She felt it reconfiguring, expanding to include something new. Her hand went to her stomach. Through the bond, Cain felt it too, his eyes widening, his breath catching. A second heartbeat, tiny and new, intertwined with Elena's own. "Cain," she whispered. "I'm pregnant." Wonder filled his voice. "You're pregnant with our child." The prophecy's final words echoed in her mind, words she'd read in that ancient book weeks ago, words that suddenly made terrible, beautiful sense. "From this union shall come the one who unites all packs, the child of two worlds, who will bring peace or destruction to the supernatural realm." Elena looked up at the moon, her silver-gold eyes reflecting its light. Inside her, the first child of Moon Witch and Alpha King bloodlines in 1,000 years had just begun to grow. If you are enjoying this video, do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 8. 3 months had transformed the Blackwood estate from a battlefield into a beacon. Elena stood on her balcony, watching the morning sun paint the rebuilt walls in shades of gold. Where fire had scarred the eastern wing, new stone rose stronger than before. Where blood had soaked the grounds, gardens now bloomed, roses and moonflowers, planted by pack members who wanted to honor their Luna's victory. Her hand rested on her swollen belly. 7 months along, and the baby moved constantly now, a flutter of kicks and turns that made Elena smile despite her exhaustion. The child was powerful, she could feel it in the way her Moon Witch abilities had grown, intuitive and controlled, responding to her thoughts rather than her emotions. Every pack in the Eastern Territories had sent gifts. Silver rattles and moonstone charms, blankets woven from the finest wolf fur, pledges of loyalty written in the old language. The unborn heir to the Blackwood throne was already beloved, already protected by an entire world. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Marcus entered, his face grave. "The Grand Council has assembled. They're ready for you." Elena took a breath. Today was the day, her official coronation as Luna Queen. Representatives from dozens of packs had gathered, some traveling for weeks to witness the ceremony. Some came in support. Others came to judge. Let's not keep them waiting. The great hall was transformed. Banners hung from every pillar, the Blackwood crest intertwined with a new symbol, a crescent moon wrapped in silver fire. Elena's mark, designed by Cain himself. Hundreds of wolves filled the space, their eyes following her as she walked down the central aisle. Cain waited at the end, dressed in formal black, the Alpha King crown resting on his dark hair. His golden eyes found hers, and through the bond she felt his pride, his love, his absolute certainty. She reached the dais and turned to face the crowd. The Grand Council sat in the front row, ancient alphas with weathered faces and calculating eyes. Some she recognized from the alliance they'd built. Others were strangers, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. One alpha rose. He was old, his hair silver white, his bearing rigid with tradition. "Before this coronation proceeds," he said, his voice carrying across the hall, "the council requires proof. We have heard stories of the Luna's power, but stories are not evidence. Some among us question whether a human-born." Elena raised her hand. Silver fire erupted from her palm, spiraling toward the ceiling in a column of controlled brilliance. The flames danced and twisted, forming shapes, wolves running, moons rising, the Blackwood crest blazing in midair. The display lasted only seconds, but when it faded, the ancient alpha had stepped backward, his face pale. "Would the council like further proof?" Elena asked calmly. "I can heal the wound on your left shoulder, the one that's bothered you for 40 years. I can tell you that your grandson is outside this hall, nervous about meeting his betrothed." "I can." "That won't be necessary." The alpha sat down heavily. "The council is satisfied." Elena allowed herself a small smile. The ceremony proceeded. Oaths were spoken, blessings given, traditions honored. When Cain placed the circlet on her head, silver and moonstone, cool against her brow, the hall erupted in howls of approval. Luna Queen of the Eastern Territories. The maid who had become a monarch. The weeks that followed were filled with work. Elena threw herself into her new role with the same determination that had driven her to scrub floors at Thornwood. But now, instead of marble, she polished treaties. Instead of serving others, she served her people. She established peace agreements between werewolf packs and human communities, creating cooperation in regions that had known only conflict. She opened the pack's resources to humans in need, remembering her own desperation, the empty medication bottles, the eviction notices, the feeling of being invisible. She created sanctuaries for wolves who didn't fit traditional pack structures. Omegas who had been abused. Lone wolves searching for belonging. Those who had been cast out for being different. Her doors were open to them all. "You're changing everything," Caelan said one evening, watching her review yet another proposal. "Is that a complaint?" "It's an observation." He moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "My father ruled through fear. My grandfather through tradition. You're ruling through compassion. And it's working better than either of them." He laughed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "It is. Though some of the old guard will never forgive you for proving them wrong." Her mother had fully recovered. Elena visited Margaret every afternoon, walking the short path to the cottage on the estate grounds. The alpha blood in Margaret's system had given her strength she hadn't had in years. She tended a garden now, taught young pack members about human culture, became a grandmother figure to wolves who had never known such warmth. "You look tired," Margaret said, pouring tea. "Are you sleeping?" "When the baby allows it." Elena settled into a chair, grateful to be off her feet. "She kicks most at night. Caelan says she's already training to be a warrior." Margaret smiled, but her eyes held concern. "I heard about the message from the Western Territories." Of course she had. News traveled fast in the pack. "Victor Ironclaw," Elena confirmed. "He leads a coalition of traditionalists. They think human blood in the royal line will weaken the werewolf race." "And what do you think?" Elena's hand moved to her belly, feeling her daughter kick in response to her emotions. "I think they're afraid of change. And I think fear makes people dangerous." "So what will you do?" Elena met her mother's eyes. "Whatever I have to." The months of preparation were exhausting. Warriors trained day and night. Alliances were strengthened, defenses fortified. Marcus assembled an elite guard, 30 wolves whose sole purpose was protecting the Luna and her unborn child. Elena practiced her moon witch powers obsessively, pushing herself to the limits of what her pregnant body could handle. She learned to call moonlight even in daylight, to paralyze without killing, to shield herself and others with silver fire. Caelan struggled with watching her train. "You're putting yourself at risk," he said after one particularly intense session left her pale and shaking. The baby is why I'm doing this." Elena gripped his hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Victor won't wait until I've recovered from giving birth. He'll attack when I'm most vulnerable. When our daughter is most vulnerable. I won't let that happen. I can protect you. The pack can protect you. And I can protect myself. I'm not the frightened maid you found in this estate, Caelan. I'm a Luna queen, and queens fight for their people." He pulled her close, his forehead pressed to hers. Through the bond, she felt his fear warring with his pride, his protective instincts battling his respect for her strength. "I know," he finally whispered. "That's what terrifies me." The vision came during the 8th month. Elena woke gasping, moonlight streaming through the window, the baby kicking frantically in her womb. Images burned in her mind, 2 futures, diverging paths, possibilities that hung on the choices they would make. In one future, she and Caelan hid. They ran from Victor's coalition, spent years in exile, watched their daughter grow up hunted and afraid. The werewolf world descended into civil war, pack against pack, until nothing remained but ashes. In the other future, they stood. The battle was terrifying, hundreds of wolves, blood and fire, moments where everything seemed lost. But they fought together, human and wolf, and they won. Their daughter was born into a world they had made safe through courage. Elena told Caelan everything. "The moon showed me," she said, still trembling. "We can't run. We have to face this. Then we face it." His hand covered hers on her belly. Together. Victor attacked 3 weeks before her due date. 300 wolves poured from the forest, ancient warriors, powerful alphas, the old guard who refused to accept change. They came with overwhelming force, certain of victory. They underestimated the Luna Queen. Elena stood on the front lines, her pregnant belly protected by armor Marcus had designed. Cain raged beside her, terrified for her safety, but she wouldn't budge. "Trust me," she said through the bond. "Trust what we've built." Victor's army charged. Elena raised her hands and called down the moon itself. Silver fire poured from the sky, not killing, not burning, but paralyzing. Wolves froze mid-leap, forced back into human form, their ability to fight stripped away. The display of power was unprecedented, terrifying, beautiful. Victor himself broke through, challenging Cain to single combat. But when he ordered his wolves to attack Elena while Cain was distracted, her guard intercepted them, and Victor's own coalition members turned on him in disgust. Honor still mattered. Even to traditionalists. Isolated and facing Cain's fury, Victor fought desperately. But he was old, and Cain was fighting for everything he loved. Within minutes, Victor was on the ground, Cain's claws at his throat. "Cain." Elena's voice cut through his rage. "Don't." He looked at her, golden eyes wild, wolf demanding blood. "Show him the new way is better," she said. "Mercy, not murder. Evolution, not extinction." The moment stretched. Cain's claws pressed deeper, drawing blood. Then he stepped back. "Exile," he growled. "Leave and never return." Victor was dragged away, broken and defeated. The coalition dissolved around him, most wolves choosing to kneel before the Luna who had shown them more power and more compassion than they had ever witnessed. Elena's mercy won what Cain's strength never could. The birth came during the full moon. It was difficult, moon which babies required power as well as strength, and Elena channeled moonlight through every contraction. Cain held her hand, sharing her pain through the bond, refusing to leave her side. When their daughter finally arrived, screaming and perfect, Elena wept. Tiny fingers. Dark hair like her father. Silver eyes like her mother. And when the moonlight touched her skin, she shifted. A wolf cub, smaller than Elena's hand, with fur as black as midnight. The first werewolf born able to shift at birth in over 500 years. "Lyra," Elena whispered, the name coming to her like a gift. "After the constellation that guided me to you." Cain's voice was thick with tears. "Lyra Blackwood. Princess of the Eastern Territories." 2 weeks later, they stood on their balcony. The sunrise painted the world in gold, and below them, wolves and humans began their day together. Training together. Working together. Building a future no one could have imagined. Lyra slept peacefully in Elena's arms, occasionally shifting between baby and cub in her dreams. "We did it," Cain whispered. "We survived everything." Elena smiled, leaning into his warmth. "We didn't just survive. We built something better. A world where our daughter won't have to choose between her natures." Cain kissed her softly. "You saved me that day in the forest. But you keep saving me every day after. And you gave me a life I never dreamed possible." She looked up at him, silver gold eyes shining. "You saw a maid and made her a queen." In the distance, more wolves approached, packs drawn by the legend of the Luna Queen, the maid who saved the Alpha King. Elena's story was spreading, giving hope to every outcast, every half-breed, every person who had ever felt they didn't belong. Lyra stirred, letting out a cry that was somehow both baby and cub. Elena and Cain smiled at each other. Their story was ending. But their daughter was just beginning. That I know you enjoyed this video. Do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Drop your thoughts in the comments section below and share this video to family and friends. The end.